Hey, this is Mike Casu, and this is the Brute Strength Podcast. This episode, I'm back with my friend Rob McDonald, general manager of Jim Jones, recent author, former UFC fighter, and all-around great guy. This is our third round, and this one is our best one yet, if I can say so myself. We talk about his experience as an athlete, the experiences that shaped him mentally as well as physically. We talk about his new book, training philosophies at his cult-like following Jim Jones, as well as lots of other things. Hope you enjoy the show. What's up? This is Mike Casu, and this is the Brute Strength Podcast. I'm back for round 3 with my good friend Rob McDonald. We're in his garage. We actually have 2 of him because he has a poster of himself right behind himself. So we got 2 of him. Rob, glad to be here, man. Thanks for making some time.
I always bring backup, so I'm ready to go.
Oh, yeah.
And thank you guys for coming here.
So in the past 2 videos that we've done, or podcasts we've done, we get a ton of, because we've done both of them on video, we've gotten a ton of YouTube questions about your bicep.
Yep.
And so can you just start out there and tell that story?
Do you want the real story, or do you want the one I usually tell people?
A little bit of both.
Okay, so the one I usually tell people is that when my son was born, and he was, just 3 months old, I had him born in Canada. I'm from the Arctic, so I took him for a walk so he could see our home country, and I got attacked by a polar bear. And most people, shockingly, just believe it and buy off on it that I fought a polar bear to the death with.
Of course.
Which makes me feel really good about myself that they think I could handle my business like that. But the true story is I had a fight lined up against a guy named Hector Ramirez. He was a really good UFC fighter, and I'd hurt my bicep 10 days before the fight, but a bunch of family members and friends had planned a trip to see me fight and bought tickets, and so I fought anyway, and then the thing tore completely. And at that time in my life, I was training military people. I was, traveling to different military bases in the States doing Tier 1 seminars, and I really couldn't afford to take the time off work. So I just didn't get it fixed. And now it's kind of become a calling card where, you could post anything about me on the internet, the most shocking picture you can imagine, and somebody would say, what happened to your bicep?
Right.
So now people are like, why don't you get it fixed? And I'm like, well, no, it's kind of my thing.
Right.
Like somewhere in the world right now, someone's like, do you know Bobby Maximus? They're like, no. He's like, he's that trainer with one bicep. And then they'll be like, oh, that guy, I know him.
Yeah.
So,
Do you have any limitations whatsoever in that arm?
only in one weird place. So if you were to hold your hands like this, this motion is where I'm weak. So if you were to hold my hand down here, I can exert a lot of force. You hold it here, I can't turn over. So theoretically,
Okay, gotcha.
I can't
So going from
do
supinated
that.
to pronated.
Just that.
Interesting.
So if I was a baseball pitcher, it might take 4 miles an hour off my fastball or whatever that would amount to, maybe throwing a football. But I haven't noticed a difference in pull-ups or deadlifts or bicep curls even, or anything else that I do.
Right.
So, and the whole thing with injuries is I've been told that I could have a torn labrum in my hip, which I should get fixed. The doctor told me that. But my response was it doesn't cause me pain and I can deadlift 600 pounds without a belt or straps. Like, why would I go through 6 months of rehab? So maybe it limits me more than I think. Maybe I could, deadlift more with my hip or do something, the same thing with the bicep. But to me, it doesn't seem worth the 6 months of recovery from surgery and then another 6 months to get back where I was.
Right. You're doing everything in your life that you want to be capable of doing.
It doesn't seem to hold me back, and I'm capable of everything I want to be capable of.
Right.
Now, if a doctor came to me and said, if we fix this, you will deadlift 700 pounds, well, shit, sign me up. But I don't know if it works like that,
Right. So the first 2 shows that we did, we talked a lot about you as a coach, your philosophies, all of that kind of stuff. Today, the first part of this, I want to talk more about you as an athlete because you're one of the biggest freaks I've ever met.
Thank you.
In so many ways. And so I'm wondering, and it's not only the tangible, measurables, but also your discipline, your mindset, etc. So I want to go all the way back, and could you explain to us a little bit how you were as a kid, energetically, what your ambitions were, fears, anything about that?
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing is, is I grew up in the era of kids where we were all active. Like, I don't remember, I was never good at sports. I didn't make the basketball team. I couldn't play hockey. I was terrible at baseball. I was terrible at flag football, terrible at soccer, anything my parents threw me into. But we always did stuff. I mean, even you as a kid, you probably played active games. You were doing stuff outside. Like, there was no such thing as an iPhone. There was no such thing as an iPad. We didn't have a Game Boy or a Nintendo 3DS or like a little like gaming system. So you had to make your own fun. So I was as active about as any other kid, but I was terrible at sports. I was bullied, I want to say fairly heavily, but I don't even really know what that means sometimes as I say it. I mean, I got duct taped to a basketball pole once. Kids used to draw in my face with marker on the bus. I used to get wedgied on the bus.
How big were you in like high school?
Shit, in grade 9, I was probably about 145 pounds and 6 feet tall.
Right.
So I wasn't big. Like, I was a skinny kid. But a lot of kids, they don't get bullied based on how big or small they are. It's more your demeanor. I was kind of a quiet, shy kid. And I hesitate with the bully thing because when I look back on it, it kind of sucked what happened. But at the same time, it doesn't keep me up at night now. So I don't have like a weird chip on my shoulder about it. But I was never a popular kid. When I was in grade 9, I got beat up by some hockey players in the back of gym class, and they broke my collarbone. And I didn't want that to ever happen again, so I joined the wrestling team. And first year wrestling, I was terrible. I lost every match. Second year wrestling, I won one match. And then something kind of happened. I found the weight room, and I started lifting weights. And I'll never forget the first day I go in because I was scared shitless. And I don't know if you remember your first day in a weight room, but like when you're the skinny kid that's never done anything before, it's a terrifying, intimidating place. And I went in, and a couple of the older kids kind of helped me and showed me some stuff. And I started lifting, and then I started to get bigger, and I started to get stronger. And then the confidence that I would build there kind of transferred over to wrestling. And anyway, I got really good. And from there, my athletic career kind of took off. I went from not being able to make the football team to being fourth string on the football team to being probably the best player on our football team. And so I had opportunity to play college ball or wrestle. I chose to wrestle. And then from there, I found myself in the UFC. And then here I am. And the whole thing was fueled not by some natural athletic talent. Like, I was in a grade 9 or ninth grade in the United States, as you guys say, getting looked at for scholarships. I wasn't even making the team. But through hard work day in and day out, I ended up making something out of not a lot.
Wow. What were some of your biggest mentors throughout, high school, UFC, et cetera? And that could include your parents even.
Yeah, for sure. Well, my parents, obviously, because your mom and dad set the table for the rest of your life. Like, if you have a good home life and people in leadership roles, as parents have, that believe in hard work and holding yourself accountable, then you're always going to be like that. I'll never forget my mom one day. I came home with a 90 in math, and she was disappointed in me. And I couldn't wrap my head around how I got a 90%, and she was disappointed. And she said it was because I didn't work for it. On the other hand, I came home with a 60 in another subject at one time, and she was fine with it because I actually tried. So I had a mom and a dad that instilled in me the end result doesn't matter. It's the work that you put into it. We don't care if you're the best in the world or the worst in the world. How hard did you try?
Right.
So
Did you do your best?
If I do my best, that's all they ever expected of me. And it's a lesson I didn't understand as a punk teenage kid, but now being a father, I completely understand. All I want for my own kids is for them to try their best. And so they were big ones. Eugene Vinci, who was my first wrestling coach, obviously a mentor, and he didn't talk a lot, but he led by example. And he was an important person because he never gave up on me. When I lost every match first year, he would still coach me with the same amount of enthusiasm. He would still help me. He would still look after me. And so he wasn't necessarily a mentor in terms of the things he said, but just in terms of the attention he paid to me. And I felt as valued as the best person on our team. And that was a really important lesson for me. And then my, wrestling coaches in university, Ray Takahashi and Francis Clayton. To run a university program is an incredible, incredible thing. And the effort, I don't think people know the effort it takes that goes into coaching. Like we throw the word coach around in the exercise industry.
Right.
But for a lot of people, a coach is nothing more than a rep counter. To be a real coach, you've got to really care and be in people's business. And it's got to be a vocation more than a job. And so I would say those people set the entire table for the rest of my life.
And I can kind of see that in you. I mean, and as a university coach, you have to be absolutely obsessed with
Yes.
what you do. It's not just going to practice, not even just studying game film, but the minute you wake up till the minute you go to bed, you have to be thinking about it because someone else is out there recruiting better than you, out there, strategizing more than you. And I see a lot of that in you where there's never like a down time. When you're in the gym, like you are always trying to help people.
Well, you have to be, but even outside the gym, you have to be like that. Like my wrestling coach knew what was going on in my life. If you were having trouble with a girlfriend, he inserted himself into it. If you were going through a depression, you were having a hard time in school, he tried to help you because you know as well as I do, off the field life translates to on-field performance.
Absolutely.
And so if you're going to be a coach, you can't just have somebody show up an hour a day and count the reps and give them a pat on the back. You've got to be willing to deal with them with all the good, all the bad, all the ugly. You've got to be able to mentor them. And so those things were super influential to me because I approach coaching from a much more what I'll call university or professional coach standpoint, as opposed to I got my NASM certification, my ACE certification, and I was just going to train some people now. And not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just I think if you really want people to get results, you've got to go way further than that.
Absolutely. So you get out of high school, you get done with wrestling, you get into the UFC.
Yes.
And obviously, by the fact that you were in the UFC means you had a very successful career as a mixed martial artist.
Yep.
What were some of your biggest lessons throughout that experience?
Well, so the first lesson actually came before that. The whole reason I got in the UFC is because I felt kind of lost. And I didn't accomplish what I wanted to accomplish in wrestling. I wanted to make the Olympic team. I didn't. I was close. And there was one particular instance that stood out to me. There was a person I had to wrestle off against. And it was a very important wrestle off to determine who got to go to the Olympic spot. And I lost 7-6 and 7-5 to this person. Barely lost.
Wow.
And for a long time, I blamed my work ethic. I blamed coaches. I blamed that he was just better than me. I had a bad performance. But what it really came down to is my work ethic was flawed. Sure, I worked my ass off in the gym. I would wrestle for 3 hours at a time. I would, wake up in the middle of the night to do weights. I would do everything that I thought I could do to get better, but I refused to watch videotape because it was something that I just didn't think related to the sport.
Right.
And, if I would have watched some videotape on this guy, I probably would have won.
Right.
And by probably, I would have won. And that was a really important lesson to me. That was the day I woke up and looked at myself in the mirror and I'm like, I'm a bag of shit. Like I talk about working hard and I say I'm willing to do anything, but I'm really not. Because in the last 4 years, I've went on a lot of dates, went out with friends a lot, saw a lot of movies, played a lot of PlayStation 2, did a lot of other stuff. I could have watched some videotape.
Right.
And it was a day that kind of taught me that your actions have to be consistent with your words. Like, how much do you really care? If you're not willing to spend an hour of your day watching videotape, how much can you say you care? So I would say to you, Mike, how bad do you want to be the best exercise physiologist in the world? And you say, more than anything. I'm like, would you give a kidney for it? And you're like, nope, you don't want it that bad. I mean, it sounds absurd, but that's the example. And that's what that situation taught me. So I kind of got into the UFC, not because I loved mixed martial arts, because I felt I had something to prove. I wanted to do it the right way now.
Right.
And I worked as hard as I could and then found myself in the UFC. And my second big lesson was with, the mind is primary stuff, that it's not just physically gifted work that gets you your end result. And that was taught to me because when I first fought in the UFC, I fought at Mandalay Bay. There was about 18,000 people there. And I remember being in the locker room thinking all kinds of negative stuff about myself. I don't belong here. This guy's had way more fights than me. It's my first fight in the UFC, and they give me this guy that's way more experienced than me. There's 10 times the people in this stadium than were in my hometown growing up. People are going to laugh at me if I lose. I have no business here. So I was thinking all this negative stuff and negative self-talk. And of course, I went out and I got murdered in that fight. Like, I lost in the first round and was kind of humiliated and went home. And I didn't know what to do to help myself. And I had a good buddy named Tom Murphy who fought in the UFC who recommended a sports psychologist to me. The guy had worked with George St. Pierre. He'd worked with David Loiseau. He'd worked with Rich Franklin. And I said, sure, I'll give it a shot. And through working with him for the next 3 months, I got my mind right and fixed all of that negative self-talk. And my next fight, I fought a guy who was 42-4, way better record than me, guy I should have lost to, but I wasn't thinking those negative thoughts anymore before the fight. All I was thinking was, I was second in the world for amateur kickboxing. I was Canadian Jiu-Jitsu champion. I'm a great wrestler. There's no way this guy outworks me in the weight room. This is my fight to win. All of these, what he would call green light thoughts, to propel me to victory. And I won that fight in one submission of the night. So then I was thinking I got fixed. I don't have a problem anymore. I don't need this sports psychologist. I'm just going to do it on my own. The next fight, right back to that negative place. And that whole ordeal just taught me that you constantly have to work on your brain and you constantly have to push yourself beyond your physicality.
Right.
Like, you can get a certain amount of, I guess, success based on your body, but that's where it ends. And the best in the world, if you want to be the best in the world, you have to focus at the stuff between the ears.
I know we could talk about this topic for hours, but what can you explain the green light, red light?
Yeah,
thing that he taught you?
So red light thoughts are negative thoughts that everyone has, and we all have them. Anyone that tells you they're not insecure about something is a liar. Everyone's got insecurities. You may have been insecure about something about this podcast today. I might be insecure about being on the podcast, but everyone has these voices that jump inside their head. Everyone also has positive self-talk as well. There are times you're confident, you feel good about yourself. And in any situation in life, whether it's buying a car, buying a home, accepting a new job, asking your girlfriend to marry you, you're going to have this balance of red and green light thoughts. And it's a negotiation that goes on inside your head. Well, when the red light thoughts overwhelm you, you lose that negotiation and it's going to negatively impact your success. When the green light thoughts win, that's when you're going to be successful. And so what you want to do is, when you think red light thoughts, you have to flush them out with as many green light thoughts as possible. So you think a negative thought about yourself, Mike, you've now got to think 5 positive things to wash that negativity away. The other thing I would do is I have these little green dots that I use that I stick on all kinds of stuff in my house.
Okay.
The fridge, maybe my wallet, my cell phone. And whenever I see a green dot, I have to think a green light thought. I've actually recently had some made with the Maximus logo.
Nice.
Because it's actually one of the things that people have really jumped onto with the kind of stuff I talk about. But telling yourself this positive self-talk every day, you start to believe it. And essentially the theory is, if you don't see yourself as a winner, you'll never be a winner. If you see yourself as a loser, you will always be a loser. And so you're trying to rewrite that narrative or control that conversation or that negotiation inside your head.
So that, first off, that's great stuff. I think one of the problems with a lot of people is that they're not even aware of their thinking. Yeah. They don't hear that voice. So when when he first brought this up to you, were you aware of your thinking? And if not, how did you become more aware?
No, not as bad as it was. And it's something I really had to work on. And I think a lot of people badmouth themselves and they're not aware. It's hard for me to put myself back in that space and remember like what the trigger was to get me to believe in myself. It was more this like brainwashing protocol, I call it, where you convince yourself that you're good. But I now see it a lot better from the other side of the fence when I train other people. And I am shocked the shit that comes out of people's mouths. Like, hey, I want you to do this. I can't do that. Or I don't feel that good today. Or I'm tired. And I heard it like when we used to train together all the time. If we could go back and put a microphone during those training sessions, I'll bet you everyone had negative self-talk, because everybody does it and you don't realize you're doing it. So now, as part of my, if I call it a coaching protocol, I don't allow anyone to negative self-talk around me at all. So if you say, hey, I can't leave the gym. I don't want to leave the gym. I don't think I'm as good as leave the gym. So I don't allow it. I shut it down. And then when there's a very real consequence attached to negative self-talk, people learn.
Right.
You know?
And the mere act of becoming more conscious of it, right?
Yep.
Just bringing it up, making it a thing is going to make people more aware of it in general.
Well, absolutely,
The more times you
especially if
bring it
someone
up.
calls you out. You know, so if I say something negative about myself, your job as a friend or a coach or a mentor should be, well, do you really believe that? And then force the person to ask the question.
Right.
So when I say, yeah, I had a shitty fight career, do you really believe that, Rob? Well, yeah, I mean, you fought in the UFC. So if you fought in the UFC, you're a shitty fighter, right? Well, not really. So are you calling anyone that fought in the UFC a shitty fighter? Well, and you start to debunk kind of, and eventually the person will admit, you're right. I don't know why I said that. I was looking for attention. Something will come out of that. You just have to work as a coach to call people out on their bullshit.
Right. So nowadays you have more irons in the fire than you've ever had. You
Yep.
just wrote a book. You're the general manager of a very large company. You're fighting in the world championships of jiu-jitsu this year. You're a father, you're a husband. What does your daily and even weekly schedule look like that allows you to do all of these things really well?
Oh, shit. I tell people I work 24/7, 365. That's not really true. I mean, I do have some downtime, but everything I do in a day has got to be set towards a goal. And so if my goal is to make Jim Jones the biggest gym in the world, I'm thinking about that right now. When I'm eating dinner tonight, I'm thinking about how to make that happen. When I'm working out, I'm thinking about how to make that happen. And what it all comes down to is every part of my day has a purposeful goal. If my goal is to spend an hour of quality time with my kid, it's an hour of quality time with my kid, and I eliminate all the outside distractions. Now, admittedly, am I perfect at this? No. We all screw up. There's times I get distracted by the phone. There's times I kind of don't have great time management, but it's learning that every minute of your day has to have a purpose. And if you do that, you can get a lot of shit done.
I was reading a really interesting article yesterday about productivity in general. And basically he created this pyramid for productivity. The bottom was what he called fundamentals, then the psychology, and then things like different apps, like productivity apps. And in the fundamentals, things that people seem to skip over are things like sleep 8 hours every single night. Know what you're going to do, exactly what your most important things are to do every single day. Right? And by doing those very, very simple things that most people skip over, it's amazing what we can accomplish.
Oh, for sure. And throw a bit of time management in there and then you're sailing. Like when you answer email, do you sit down for an hour and answer all your emails? Or are you trying to email, talk on the phone, and text message at the same time?
Right.
I mean, how many times have you been in a conversation on the phone where you've got a person on speaker and you're texting at the same time and then you can't remember what the person just said?
Thousands.
It happens to us all the time, right? No, tune in on that conversation. And you'd be shocked if you can do that, how much quicker you can get stuff done.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons if you want to have a great workout, put your phone away. Don't get distracted.
So now you also have probably 10 times more opportunities than you even know what to do with or have time for. How do you filter through those opportunities, whether it be from value standpoint, financial, anything in between?
Man, that's a really hard question. And it's something that I struggle with a lot. And I think it's a lot of things a lot of athletes struggle a lot with, especially in a day and age where people get taken advantage of. You never know what's a good deal, what's a bad deal. And the reality is when somebody comes to you most of the time with an endorsement, they've got an angle. They're not just doing it to be altruistic because they love the Brute Strength podcast. They're coming to you because they think they can get something out of it. And so the first thing that helps me filter through this is I've gotten rid of the money talk. I've gotten rid of the quality of the product talk, and I look at the quality of the person in charge. That's helped me filter through a lot of bullshit. And so some of the companies I'm involved with, Lalo Tactical's one of them, Gnarly Nutrition one of them, Meat Locker's one of them. Like the things that these three companies have in common is they are run by incredible people who I would be friends with anyway. Like they're just good people. They would help me whether I ever sold a shoe for them or a supplement or a steak for them or not. So when you start dealing with good people, I think that a lot of the other stuff falls into place. You know, like you put your faith in the right person and then trust that you will be rewarded when the time comes. Now, quality of product is an important thing about endorsing something, but that also comes from the quality of person, because if you've got the right quality person, they're not going to put out a shitty product.
Right.
And if they're a quality person, they're going to compensate you right because they know it's the right thing to do. They're not going to try to take advantage of you. So by just dealing with the person, I want to meet, like if somebody comes to me and says, hey, do you want to be an endorser? I want to meet the person that owns your company, the person that runs your company. And I want to get to know you for a while first before I can make a decision about what I want to do.
And that's really the long-term approach, because sometimes you may get a better deal up front from someone you don't really connect with, you don't share the same values with, but in the long term, you know that someone that you can trust, that you share the same values with, it's going to work out better in the end.
Yeah.
And even if it's not financial, right? It might just be a better fit for you overall.
Yeah, and the scary thing about that is you have to bet on yourself. Because I've been there. I've been tempted to take the quick paycheck. I've been tempted to take the offer for something I really didn't believe in. And that temptation gets ratcheted up the more pressure's in your life. Like if I'm going to lose my house, I'm going to sign anything, right? If I'm financially sound, then I can afford to think about it. So sometimes it's easier said than done. But with these long-term relationships, you're betting on yourself that you're going to make this work. You're betting on yourself that you've chosen the right person, and you're willing to delay getting paid for 5 or 6 years any significant amount of money because you know there's a big paycheck down the road.
Right.
But that takes a lot of faith in yourself, not to just take the quick buck.
Right. One of the things I've learned as well is that it has to be something that I'm either very passionate about, or again, I just really believe in what that company is doing, because money, the pull of money fades very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't want to be a flash in the pan. And you also don't want to be somebody that's caught using a product that's not your product. And you don't want to be taking something you hate or using something you hate being inauthentic. So I'll tell you, at least from my experience, the shoes I wear, if Lalo dumped me tomorrow, I would still wear their shoes. And I probably shouldn't say that. I can say it because they're not the people that would just dump me, because I've partnered with really good people. But I would wear and buy their stuff anyway because I love it. I was a fan of the brand before it happened. Same thing with Gnarly Nutrition. I would use their stuff whether they were giving it to me or not, or paying for me or not. So that makes it very easy to be affiliated with the company because I feel proud of it when I go to bed. It's something I would recommend anyway. It's something I recommended before I was in cahoots with these people. So, you know, that's an important part of the puzzle too. I would recommend, like, judge the person, and then also make sure you align yourself with people you really believe in. Or not people that you really believe in, a product you really believe in that you really actually like.
Right. So you're constantly pushing your boundaries. You are doing more seminars than ever. Your personal brand has grown tremendously. So you're in the public eye more. You're a new author. It's challenging. It's, for most people, absolutely scary. So do you have any fear and anxiety associated with any of this? And then if so, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, you know, my biggest fear and anxiety is that I don't do things a conventional way, and it scares the shit out of me. So I come from a family where my dad worked for the railway, my mom was a nurse, both had a pension, you had a regular paycheck. The kind of life I live, the gym could get shut down tomorrow, and I could lose it. The endorsements could fall through, business could fall through. In a way, I kind of monetize on my Instagram, which is kind of tough for me to understand because it's not just showing up and getting an hourly check. Sometimes some of my biggest paychecks come every quarter, and you don't get the security of a 2-week check. So that really scares me sometimes from a security standpoint, which can be tough. But once again, I've got to have that talk with myself with these red and these green light thoughts about betting on myself that I'll be okay. I've got to trust in my hard work. I've got to trust in my work ethic, trust in the people I put faith in, and trust that it's all going to work out. The other fear is, what if I'm not good enough? Like, we all go through Why would somebody, and I'll be very honest with you guys about this podcast. I've done 2 with you. I read comments all the time about how good they are. But it goes through my mind, why would somebody want to listen to a 3rd podcast with me? Why would these guys want to speak to me again? Like, what if I blow it? What if I'm not good enough? What if I'm... Those things are things that haunt me that I constantly have to work on. And then rely on the positive information that you do get. Well, no, they told me it's one of the top rated podcasts of all time. Of course they want me back. That's a much more positive thing for me to think about, and it helps me quell that fear.
And also, what I know about you, I've known you for 7-8 years, and I've never seen you stop.
Yeah.
Right? I've never seen you give up on anything or quit anything, right? And what I've learned for me personally is the fear, no matter how much I understand about myself, no matter how like zen I am, the fear never goes away. It's just how am I going to take effective action consistently?
Yeah.
And that's what you always do.
Yeah, and it's just dealing with that fear. So it's just, everyone's got it. And I think, you're talking about, to bring it back to the negative self-talk, the awareness, just being aware that you're scared and being able to admit that you're scared, that's more than half the battle.
Right.
Because then you can learn how to deal with it and come up with a strategy to deal with it.
Yeah, once you can identify it as fear rather than just being caught up in your own head in that fear, it's a huge difference.
Yep.
When you can observe those thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, for you, the first year, the CrossFit Games you won. But the second, I'll guarantee you had some fear going into that.
Oh, yeah.
Like you had to deal with it. Like, what if we lose? What are people going to say now if we lose? How's this going to work? I mean, all those thoughts crossed through your head. I mean, you got to deal with them.
Yeah.
And you know what? If you were on your 10th in a row, you'd still feel that way about the 11th.
Right.
And then you'd feel that way about the 12th.
Yeah, for me, it was the fact that I was the weak link on the guy's side. So It was, they don't value me. Everyone else looking in doesn't think I'm any good. And so on one hand, I can let that get to my head and not put in the work and just be really insecure about it. But what I chose to do is work even harder so that I belonged on that team.
Yeah.
And it helped me tremendously.
And also, so that kind of stuff doesn't happen in other venues of your life, right? Because if you feel that way about the CrossFit Games, you probably felt that way when you did SEAL Fit. You probably felt that way when you open your own gym. You probably feel that way when you go through a crisis in your marriage or your relationship. Like, it's stuff that we see over and over and over again.
Right.
And that's why I'm so adamant on training the brain, because I think it affects more than just competition in the gym. It affects all these other areas.
Right. So I want to talk a little bit about I've been to 2 of your seminars.
Yep.
And I want to talk a little bit about the curriculum, because it's incredible. It is very different. So first off, how did you guys go about creating that thing? It's so comprehensive. How do you even approach a project like that?
The biggest thing is that it needed to be education first. We didn't want to just aim for some certification that people could hang on their wall. We wanted to build something that could help people change other people's lives. And I don't say that loosely. I mean, I know some people say, I want to change people's lives. And when it comes down to it, they can't back that talk up. But I've had so many experiences with Jim Jones where people have had their lives changed by the stuff we've taught. I know there's power in that. But to do that, you have to be willing to play the long game and sacrifice stuff. Our seminars are not inexpensive. It takes over a year to get certified. There's 3 different seminars. There's a 2-day, another 2-day, and then a 1-week seminar and an internship after that. Like, if you want to be a Jim Jones instructor, you have to be fully committed. It's not something you can sign up online and just get in 3 hours.
Right.
But we wanted it to be that way because we do value that education. And when we put our stamp on you, we want people to know that this person hasn't just graduated in a day or read a book or had a friend take an online test for them, because I'm sure that stuff happens. We have vetted them, we've given them the education, and you're getting the best that we can give you.
One of the coolest parts about it is both of the ones I've been to are transformational type seminars, right? Like a Landmark Forum, like a Tony Robbins, where you leave a completely different person.
Yes.
How do you guys do that?
You have to care. And that's the biggest thing. I've, taught almost every single seminar that we've ever had. And now we have another gentleman named Jake Hutchinson who is starting to train fundamentals on his own. And he's the first person I've met in a long time that cares as much as I do. Like, he genuinely wants to make these seminars the best that they can be. And it's, you really have to care. You have to connect with everybody. And just one small example of that, you've been to my seminars. I make it a point to remember every single person's name within the first workout. Now, I could probably get by not doing that, but that means I don't care. I want to have a personal connection with somebody. I answer every email that somebody sends. I will pull you aside in the seminar and ask you about your life. You've got to put all of your energy into it. And that's the biggest thing. It's a lot more than just a product. It's a lot more than just a subject I'm teaching. I'm sharing my life with you.
And then you're also indoctrinated into the very twisted workouts that you guys have, right? Some things that I've never seen anywhere else, like an IWT, like there's one workout where you switch the monitors on two ergs and you're going head to head against someone, but you can only see theirs.
Yes.
That's some sick shit.
Yeah, I like it. But at the end of the day, people say that, like, you guys work so hard. You're crazy. That's some sick shit. And people throw around in the exercise community this term suffering, and we've been guilty of it in the past too. But really, if you can afford to go to one of the best gyms in the world and take a weekend off from your family to come to a seminar and learn, how bad are you really suffering? Like, how bad is it really? And I'll tell you, like, your CrossFit teams, and you're a person that's standing in front of me that I can attest personally, I've made you fucking suffer. Like, you've been put through the ringer. But at the end of the day, all I remember about training with you guys is we had a lot of laughs. Like, I don't remember the pain of anything. I just remember having a lot of laughs, a lot of fun, eating some good food together, talking some shit, and you guys winning.
Right.
Like, at the end of the day, that's my memory of what happened there. So how bad was it really?
Right.
So it's all how you frame something too. And if you've ever played a sport, so if there's anyone that's watching this podcast that has wrestled, that's played football, that's played basketball, an hour in the gym cannot compare, no matter how hard you think you work, to Hell Week for football. It can't compare to a 3-hour wrestling practice at 6 a.m. So it's all relative too.
Right.
And that's not to put down the gym. Some people do a lot of stuff, but how hard is it really?
Can you explain your programming philosophy a little bit? Again, that's another thing that's very unique and interesting.
Yeah. So the first thing with the programming is it's goal driven. We believe in accomplishing a goal. And there's no such thing as a cookie cutter program, and no one can do the same program. So if your goal is to win the CrossFit Games, awesome. You get a program. If your goal is to lose 30 pounds, you get a completely different program. What if your goal is just to be a better dad? Then you get a completely different program than those two. So we're very goal-driven and goal-oriented. And one of the things that I demand in programming is every day somebody has to ask themselves, does this get me closer to my goal, or does it get me farther away from my goal? And if it gets you closer to the goal, you're doing it. If it gets you farther away from the goal, you have to have the maturity to back off. That's the biggest one, is that goal-driven individuality kind of stuff. The second one is just, I'm going to say, the work ethic. Like, we don't preach 3 easy payments of $9.99. We don't preach that there's a magic pill that you can take. I don't try to sell 30-minute workouts or 15-minute workouts. I'll just tell you to your face, the only way you're going to get what you want is through real hard work. And it's going to suck. It's going to take a lot of your time. It's going to be expensive, and on and on and on. That's a hard thing to sell. But it's something that we believe, and it's something we're not willing to compromise on.
What's something that you guys have changed about your philosophy in the last year?
The biggest thing with our philosophy is our wording. And suffering, that's the perfect example. So I'm glad that was brought up. When you describe what you do in the gym and you talk about how bad you suffer, what is suffering really? Suffering is the person that can't afford to buy their kid a Christmas present. Being a dad, I don't ever want to be in that position. Suffering is not being able to afford to eat for 3 days. Suffering is watching a loved one go through a battle with addiction or go through a battle with cancer or some kind of sickness. It's really hard and honestly kind of vulgar to compare your workout this morning to those situations. You see some of these, fights with cancer people have had when they're in chemotherapy and their family's worried and they're worried about dying. And how can you compare that to a 5-minute WOD? How can you compare that to a 1-hour IWT? So we've tried to change the connotation of those words, and especially because we've tried to be more inclusive. And the gym has this imagery, and it's our fault, of being scary, hardcore, we're savages, it's invite only. But the reality is, the true spirit of the gym is we want to help people.
Right.
And so we've tried to change the narrative to be all are welcome, and you're only invited to stay if you work hard and you commit. We're willing to help everybody. You just have to prove that you belong there. So it's changing that narrative and not talking about suffering anymore, trying to talk about some other attribute of hard work.
So you use the word salvation a lot. What does that mean to you guys?
Salvation to us is about changing your life. We believe in another part of our programming, I think, that stands apart from the rest of the world, is that surprisingly, the gym isn't our focus. I care that you get better in the gym, but I care a lot more about what else that brings you. Does it make you more competent? Does it help you deal with your drinking problem? Does it help you be a better dad? I get emails all the time where people are like, I lost 20 pounds. I lost 30 pounds. And that makes me feel incredible that I've helped somebody accomplish a goal. But what really, really keeps me ticking and keeps me going is, and I just got this message the other day. Someone sent me a message that said I was in a bad depression. I wasn't a good father. I wasn't a good husband. I was swirling. I bought your book. I read it, and it changed my life. And those things are being fixed now. And I'm just like,
that's amazing.
Okay, I've done it. Like if that book helped one person be a better dad, I've done it. Like all the work that went into that, it was worth it. And so salvation for us is what you get through the gym, how it positively affects your life and makes you a better person.
That really resonates with me because that's exactly what we're after as well. And it's, the gym, exercise in general, is people just want to be happy in general. And exercise is just one way, one portion of what makes them happy. But there are so many other things that go into that happiness. So if we're not addressing the other things, then we're not creating the kind of change that we can.
No, not at all. And I believe that there's so much that goes beyond just what you do. I mean, I don't even know how I would word this. I guess it goes back to the things that I've done in my life. I was never a police officer. I was Robert McDonald, and I happened to work as a police officer. I wasn't just a UFC fighter. My whole identity wasn't pegged on that. I was Robert McDonald, and I happened to be good at UFC fighting. So you take policing away from me, which is something I really love. You take UFC fighting away from me, which is something I really love. Shit, my whole life is built around a gym. Like we're in my garage and it's a gym. You tell me I can't work out a day in my life, again, I'll still be happy. I'll figure out other things that I can do because it's a part of me and not just my entire identity. And that's what that core value that you have of yourself, that's really what I want to make better.
Have you always had that perspective? And if not, I'm assuming, something changed for you at some point. Where did you learn that?
I'll say I've had self-worth issues my whole life. I've had confidence issues. I mean, if you get bullied, if you're not the popular kid, if you're not good at stuff, it can be tough. But at the heart of it, no matter how much I got made fun of, or no matter what people said about me, or no matter other things that happened, my parents always made me feel like I was good enough, like I was a somebody, and that I deserved everything I was going to get out of life. And so I think it's always been there deep down. Sometimes it got covered up a little bit, but it's always been there deep down.
That's awesome. That's huge. Feeling like you are enough, coming from someone that you really look up to.
Yes.
And you seek love from.
Yes.
That's huge. We talked a little bit about your whole philosophy that the mind is primary and your whole experience with that. You've worked with tons of professional athletes and thousands of average Joes. When we're talking about mindset, what do you see? What are the biggest differences you see in the elite athletes, the ones that make it to the top versus everyone else?
I think it's in the elite athletes. Man, this is a hard question to answer. And I go back and forth on this. With elite athletes, I think what it comes down to is a root belief in themselves. Like you're willing again, and I've said it again and again, so I hope it doesn't sound redundant, but you're willing to bet on yourself. At least every elite athlete that I've met, they believe in themselves to a level that normal people don't. You know, like some of the guys that I train in the NBA, they believe they're the best players in the NBA. They believe, like there's no part of them that believes that I can beat them in a basketball game. And that belief almost comes down to they almost think they can beat me in a fight. Like they're willing to bet on themselves to that degree. So there is that root inherent belief in yourself. The second thing is work ethic. Mm-hmm. And work ethic's a big one that I think doesn't get the credit that it deserves. But if you play in the NBA, you've played basketball 1,000 hours for 20 years.
And kind of what you were saying, it's kind of misinterpreted what that actually means. It's not just hours on the court, right? It's everything in between.
Yeah, it's watching video. It's like hanging out with basketball people. It's like wearing the basketball sneakers. It's like it's your whole life. Mm-hmm. And you're not just showing up either. You're showing up and doing work because everyone can just show up. And so those two things, that belief in yourself combined with the willingness to put in thousands of hours, you're going to be the best in the world at what you do.
Right.
I think at that point it's easy. You're willing to do those things. That's easy.
Putting thousands of hours of being present and doing your absolute best on every single rep.
And caring. Absolutely.
Nutrition is another thing that's huge in the seminars.
Yep.
What are some of the things that you teach habits wise to your clients, to the seminars, that help them stick to different protocols, including things that you do personally?
You know, one of the biggest habits I teach, and I think it's counterintuitive, is to enjoy yourself. And a lot of people don't know how to take it when I see it, because they see when I say that, because they see my Instagram and I eat burgers and eat steak and different things like that. But I've always been a person that believes intensity is the inverse of duration, where the harder you go at something, the quicker you're going to burn out. And especially when it comes to food, because it's so cultural. And so to build healthy habits, I want to reward people by allowing them to have some of the things that they love. And food for us as a society is so social. You know, like if you come into town, I want to have a beer with you. I want to have a steak with you. I want to have a burger with you. If it's Thanksgiving, I want to share a meal with you. I mean, who the hell wants to count macros on Thanksgiving? And who the hell wants to do it at Christmas? And if something comes up, I mean, Mike, if I give you the opportunity, I have a good friend named Viet Pham who won the Iron Chef. If I say he's going to cook for us tonight, don't count your macros.
Right.
Just show up and eat and enjoy a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And so one of the things I teach people is to follow what I call the 90% rule. 90% of the time, make sure everything's on point. 10% of the time, allow yourself to have a little fun. Mm-hmm. And if you can do that, it's much easier to build those long-term habits.
Do you find that that's kind of that's a principle for a lot of things, right? To not take yourself too seriously, to make sure you're enjoying what you're doing so that you don't burn out.
Absolutely. Because if you're miserable, like say you hate sweet potatoes, but I tell you to eat sweet potatoes every day, how long is that really going to last?
2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah. And when you fall off that train, what are you going to do then? Right. Like you're going to try to destroy 3 weeks of hard work in 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. And so with everything, it's the same thing with working out. Like when I used to help write your programming, you guys had free days. On Saturday was have some fun, mm-hmm. because that's important. Like don't go through the same monotony over and over and over again. And by having fun on Saturday, you'll come back Monday and work harder. I mean, training people, have you ever let somebody program for themselves? They have an incredible amount of fun when you do that. Like when they come into the gym on a Wednesday and you're like, Mike, you can pick the workout today. Their enthusiasm goes through the roof, not just for that session, but for the next 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, whatever it is. So allowing people to have a little bit of fun will help them maintain their habit in the rest of their life.
Love it, man. So I want to finish off with this. I believe so much in what you're doing and what Jim Jones is doing, and I want people to know about everything that you've got going on. So can you share a little bit about the book, what's in it, as well as anything else that people need to be aware of? Yeah, for sure. So first I'll start with the gym. The gym's my baby. I've been working here hard for 9 years to make this thing known. And it's something that, frankly, it's not as well known as I want it to be. You can find out about it at www.jimjones.com. I would love to see everyone for a seminar.
it is a life-changing, you said transformational. I think it's the best seminar there is out there. And that's no discrediting or no disrespect to other seminars. I just care that much and put that much into our seminar program. And so if you're interested in a lot of higher level learning, the seminar is where you need to be and have that one-on-one experience. But I also realize that not everybody can do that. It's not inexpensive, and we've all got other commitments, and we've got wives and husbands and kids and jobs and all these other things. And so the book is meant to be a piece of that you can take home. The book, you can buy it for $29.99 for Men's Health, so it's affordable for everybody. And it's meant to be where after reading it, you've felt like you've spent a month with me, where you know my philosophy, how I eat, how I recover, and my workout programming knowledge. And it's meant to be something that you can give the best CrossFitter in the world, the best football player in the world, the best hockey player in the world, or the best Olympian in the world. Or you could also give your mom or dad that's never worked out and they could still get something positive out of it. So there's something for everybody in there. And you can get that only through Men's Health right now. And it's at www.maximusbody.com. But both things are things that I really, really believe in. And I've got enough feedback from the book now, people talking about changing their lives and everything. It's something I would recommend to everybody.
Hell yeah, man. I really appreciate it. This has been phenomenal.
No, thank you. I love what you guys do. And a lot of times in the exercise industry, I will say this, there are people who I don't agree with, and those people are in the majority. And then there's a small minority of people who, this podcast is an example because like I said, I love what you guys do. We could talk for 10 hours and it would feel, if you told me this was an hour and 10 minutes right now, I'd believe you. If you told me it was 5 minutes, I would probably also believe you because it just goes by that quick because it's so enjoyable. So thank you for what you guys do.
Absolutely, man. We'll have round 4 soon.
Yes, for sure.
All right, brother.
Thank you.